Hi and welcome to SharePoint Nuggets. We're going to be talking today about server types. From time to time, we have heard people use the terms like 3 web front-end servers, 2 application servers, or 1 central administration server. But what exactly does each of these terms mean? Web front-end server, application server, or a central administration server?
Let's first talk about a web front-end server. A web front-end server is a server which hosts the websites or the web pages and returns the results when a user requests. In SharePoint 2007, there was a straightforward way of configuring your server to be a web front-end server through the configuration wizard. However, in SharePoint 2010, you don't have that option of making your server a web front-end server through the configuration wizard. Having said that, you can still configure your SharePoint server to be a web front-end server using these 2 steps. Step 1. In order to make a SharePoint server a web front-end server, the first step would be to make the SharePoint server host the website. And in order to do that, you would have to start a service. And that service is SharePoint Foundation Web Application Service. In order to start the service, you can first go to SharePoint Central Administration site and then click on Manage Services on Server. And you would find the SharePoint Foundation Web Application Service. You can click on Start. By default, you would see that this particular service has already been started on all your SharePoint servers. This is because every time you run the SharePoint configuration wizard to join a server to the farm, it automatically starts the SharePoint Foundation Web Application Service. But that does not necessarily make your server a web front-end server. In order to make a server a web front-end server, you also have to make it return the requests to the users. That brings us to step 2. Let's consider the following scenario, wherein you have server 1, which has SharePoint Foundation Web Application Service running, SharePoint Server 2, which also has the Foundation Web Application Service running, and Server 3, which has the Foundation Web Application Service. Along with that, it also has User Profile Service, Search, or the Managed Metadata Service running. Let's place a load balancer which routes the request only to server 1 and server 2. In this case, server 1 and server 2 act as a web front-end server since these are the only servers which return requests to the users. Now, let's say a user searches for a keyword. Although server 1 and server 2, which are in rotation, do not have the search services configured, they internally communicate to server 3, which has the search services configured, and return the results to the user via server 1 or server 2. Now that we've talked about a web front-end server, let's go to an application server. What exactly does an application server mean? An application server is a server which runs any application on a SharePoint server. An application could be a managed metadata service, it could be a user profile service, or it could be a search service. And making a server an application server is also straightforward and simple. You would have to follow the same methods that you did for a web front-end server. You would have to go to your central administration site, click on services on server, and then start the required applications. We've talked about a web front-end server and an application server. That now leaves us with central administration server. By default, the first server that is joined to your SharePoint farm would be your central administration server. Having said that, if you'd want to make any of your servers a central administration server at a later point of time, you could do so by following either of these 2 methods. Method 1 would be to use psconfig. Once you start the configuration wizard, you would find an advanced tab. If you click on the advanced tab, you would find an option to use this machine to host a central administration site. If you click on that and then click OK, you would have that server hosting your central administration site. Method 2, however, is straightforward and simple. It's the tried and tested method that we have been following all along. Go to your central administration site, click on Manage Services on Server, and then start the central administration service. I hope you guys have got a clearer picture about the server types of SharePoint. This is server types explained for SharePoint Nuggets. Thanks for watching.